There she is. The leader, a great giant of a man, thrust a beefy finger at her. That's the one. Take her. She'll fetch a fine price. One of them looked to Naruto. That's the bloody prince. He's not supposed to be here. Doesn't matter, a third muttered. He's a witness. Kill him.
Alicent shrieked. Guards, help.
The moment she cried out, Naruto sprang up and flung his book at the nearest man. It struck the fool in the chest. Less so too did the dagger that followed in its wake. The would-be killer pitched back, steel sprouting from his right eye. His corpse crashed into one of his fellows, dead before he struck the floor.
And then the prince was among them. A single leap carried him forward at speed, close enough to catch a second man unawares well before he could bring his blade to bear. He kicked upright with a wordless snarl, caught him by the skull and dashed it against the wall. Bashed his head in, pulping it against the stone and drawing his sword in the same instant. Steel sang from its sheath. He flung the borrowed blade across the room. It skewered a third in the throat. He dropped with a wet gurgle. The remaining duo paused, taken aback by his sudden savagery. Kill him, you fool. The leader brayed. He's just a boy. You have swords. Use them. The second stepped back. A boy doesn't move like that. Oh gods, here he comes again.
Rasengan.
Alicent didn't truly see what happened next. Not really. She glimpsed a shining something in the prince's hand, and then another man was gone, reduced to grisly red chunks upon the ground. Spattered in blood, the leader bellowed a challenge and lunged forward.
Naruto swept his legs, cuffed him hard across the jaw, and dropped him like a sack of potatoes. He fell like a stone, stricken senseless, but well alive.
All this is in an instant. Alicent crumpled to her knees, stunned by it all. Oh, her dress. It was ruined, spattered in blood.
Naruto stood, wiped a bit of blood from his face, then looked to her. I'm going to get the guards. Do you trust me?
Alicent sputtered, still dazed. What? He offered her a bloody hand. Do you trust me? Trembling fingers curled around his and held tight. Yes. Naruto's bloody face dimpled in a small smile. Then don't let go.
He took her by the hand and swept her into his arms. Then he ran. I took my last life for granted. I lived a long one, sure, but I didn't really live. By the time I truly understood what living was, everyone was gone.
I won't make that mistake again. This time it's different. I'm going to have it all.
I am going to...
Dark words. An attack in my own home. Who would do such a thing? Viserys and the small council were furious. Rightly so. Naruto would have been furious with them if they weren't. Anger was to be expected after such a brazen attack, horror, only natural. But the outrage he glimpsed on the faces assembled before him only cemented his own. He'd brought himself and a bloody Alicent before them with evidence in hand. The rest, as they say, was history. Now it fell to them to puzzle out the culprit. That said, he'd never seen his uncle quite so angry before. Righteous anger was a good look for Viserys. It made him look like a king. Indeed, he seemed all of an instant from drawing his sword, stalking down to the black cells, and having a word with the surviving prisoner himself. The man would suffer come morning. Naruto almost pitied them. Almost. Do you see now? Lord Valarian's face was darker than thunder. The Triarchy has grown too bold. They strike at us from the stepstones. Here, his fist thumped down on the table. In the very heart of King's Landing. We must double no, triple the guard for the tourney. Should the lords of Westeros learn of this? Viserys heaved a sigh. They will not. Bloody Essos. Otto spat the word like a curse. They've grown bold. Too bold, if they think they can strike at us here.
Agreed? Daemon leaned back in his chair. Say the word, brother, and I'll bring fire to the stepstones.
Naruto quirked a brow. Miracle of miracles, were they actually agreeing on something? And then Otto ruined everything by turning a pointed glower father's way. Oh, Daemon slouched in his seat. You think I had a hand in this? Of course you'd accuse me, you miserable fool. You blame me for everything. Always. My son was there. My son saved your daughter. A lopsided smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I dare say you owe him some gratitude. Perhaps you should be kissing his boots. Viserys turned to look his way. You fought them off, alone. This time, he didn't bother to conceal his smile. I was well taught.
Daemon preened in his chair.
Lionel Strong granted him a grave nod. I would expect no less. The king granted him a careworn smile. Well done, nephew of mine.
The hand of the king took the insult with good grace and looked to him instead. Do you recall anything they said? Anything at all?
Naruto grimaced. Yes, he did. He dearly wished he hadn't. They said she would fetch a high price. Alicent whimpered and tucked herself tighter against his side, all but burying her head in his shoulder. She hadn't let go of his hand since he'd first ferried her out the tower. Not once. He couldn't even blame her. Poor girl was shaken by her brush with death. Anyone in their right mind would be. An absent hand stroked the back of her head as the lords of Westeros denigrated back into baseless bickering. As they did, a small cynical part of him began to wonder who might best stand to benefit from such an attack. Viserys. No, his uncle was a good man, a kind man, and sadly, a weak man. He would never sanction such a thing. Daemon might seem the logical conclusion due to his dislike of Otto, but again, there was a flaw there, too. If Daemon knew he and Alicent were growing fond of one another, he'd laugh himself silly. He likely already suspected it at that. Everyone would after today's display. Who would want her kidnapped, then? Grand Maester Mellows. Unlikely. He had nothing to gain from any of this. He looked positively ashen. Indeed, he hadn't said a word. Master of Coin, Lyman Beesbury. The man was old, but he was a firm adherent to the rule of law.
Master of Laws, Lionel Strong. Honorable, decent, an ally of Viserys. Another good man.
Master of Ships, Curly's Velaryon. Now there was a chance. The man was ambitious and he undoubtedly stood to benefit now that the crown's anger was focused firmly on the stepstones. Driftmark would prosper once the Triarchy was burned out of there. But was he bold or desperate enough to risk such a gambit solely for the sake of his ambition? By that very logic, was Otto. Would he really endanger his own daughter to further his own aims? If he hadn't been there, they would have taken her. There could be no doubt about that. Only everything else. The guards had been gone, but he'd seen blood on the attackers' swords. Had they fought their way into the keep or been let in, killing those who weren't complicit? Questions upon questions, riddles upon riddles. It was enough to make his head ache. He wanted to sleep, but there would be none of that today.
Enough. Viserys brought a fist crashing down on the table in a rare show of force, responding to something he hadn't heard. Lord Corlys, we shall tend to the stepstones after the tourney tomorrow. You have my word. Still speaking, he craned his neck to the left. Daemon.
The prince of the city sat a bit straighter in his chair, eyes alight. Brother. How many men can you muster on such short notice?
Grin. 10,000 should suffice.
Lord Velaryon rallied alongside him. I can rally at least half that much.
Then, let it be done. He rose from his chair and the others followed with a bow. All of you be on your guard. His keen gaze raked over each of them in turn. Watch over your children. We cannot allow this to happen again. On that, they were in agreement.
Maybe he should check in on his other cousins. If someone was bold enough to strike at Otto's own daughter, Rhaenyra and Laena might be marks as well. He suppressed a shiver at the thought. Neither would be able to defend themselves. Attacking the daughter of the Hand of the King was one thing, but if they went further, he shuddered to think of the consequences. Viserys was a weak man, a good man, but woe to the fool who tried to lay hand on his family. It was then that, weak, men were at their strongest. A shadow fell over him as the other lords filtered out. Distracted as he was, he didn't realize who until Alicent hugged him fiercely.
Leave us, my daughter. Otto Hightower loomed over him, blocking his path. You've more than earned your rest. The implications were left unspoken.
She faltered. Father, please. I merely wish to speak with him. Her eyes flitted between them. Naruto wondered if she'd stick up for herself.
She found her resolve at the last second, bowed her head, and kissed his cheek. His eyes widened in surprise, but she was already gone, scampering out the open doors. A lone Kingsguard peeled off to escort her on her way. Even then, Otto didn't speak until she rounded the bend. Would you stay away from my daughter? Your presence endangers her. Alicent can spend her free time however she wishes. Naruto lifted his chin to scowl up at him. She isn't your slave, whatever you might think.
She is no slave of mine. Our hearts are as one. Nothing more. He quirked a blonde brow. Is that all you have to say to me? If I hadn't been there, she would have been on a barge to Slaver's Bay by now. Otto's jaw clenched as he looked on, muscles working wordlessly as he tried to master himself. He wondered if the man was about to have a stroke. You have my thanks. He bit the words out at last. For my daughter's safe return.
Oh, he was going to milk this. And.
You love her. It wasn't a question. Well, damn, he hadn't seen that one coming. Naruto reeled back on his heels a little, unprepared for the sudden statement. Did he? It had been so long since he'd thought of such things. He wasn't sure he knew what love was anymore. Not after his first life. He felt like he could learn to, in time. But love, it was much too soon for that. For now he enjoyed her company.
I'm fond of her, he retorted at length.
Will you protect her?
With my life. Her father wore a grim smile. Good.
Wait, good. Why did he feel like he'd just walked into a trap? He shook his head. No, enough. He'd given Otto more ground than he intended. Time to go.
This has certainly been a stimulating conversation, but I think I've had enough for one day.
Naruto, what do you want, exactly? What do I want? He paused to look over his shoulder. How about peace? How does peace sound, Lord Hand? A furrow rid Otto's face. You jest. I don't. He pivoted back to face him. I simply want peace. But on your terms, the older man countered.
He shrugged. My terms are good terms.
His part said, he walked away. So long as your father remains heir, there will be no peace. The words caught at him. He paused, blew a quick breath out, and willed his anger to go with it. It's such a sad thing, isn't?
What is?
How little you trust people. He rubbed two fingers together, tutting softly. You claim to serve the realm, but so often you choose to see the worst in people. Not the best. Is it any wonder you're so paranoid? You won't live long with an attitude like that.
He kept walking. This time Otto didn't call out. Ha! Checkmate!
He'd been like that toward the end of his last life. Old, tired, paranoid. In his last go-around he'd lived too long. A long life, memorable perhaps, yet still lacking all the same. He'd outlived his people, his culture, his very civilization, watched his friends and family fade away. No more. This time it would all be his. It was almost funny, really. Once upon the time he would have found the very idea of two lives absurd. He'd used that forbidden jutsu once and he didn't think he'd ever be able to again. But now he was happy here. So he had to win. Win it all.
No matter what. Daemon caught him before he could complete his escape. Or rather his hand did.
He was first made aware of his presence by the hand on his shoulder as he left the council chambers, steering him away from the door. He sighed at it.
You're still going to compete tomorrow, I trust. He set his mouth in a firm line. I intend to.
Good. His father squeezed his shoulder. Make me proud. A pause followed as some indiscernible emotion flashed across his face. I am glad you are unharmed. He drew him into a bruising embrace and squeezed him fiercely. Naruto found himself returning it. That was as much affection as he could expect, given what had happened. I taught you well, boy. If anyone comes for you, I'll leave one alive to question. His brow furrowed. What's going to be done with the prisoner?
Oh, I suspect they'll be quiet talkative once we're through with them.
Naruto blinked. Demon patted him on the back. Nothing you need concern yourself with.
0. I don't know.
A man's wail split the black cells. Interrogation by fire was a terrible thing to behold.
Daemon found a certain poetic justice in the flames. One had to be careful with them. Hot enough to burn, but not powerful enough to consume. Banked at just the right temperature to torment without taking the victim's ability to speak. It was a fine art, one you could only perfect through practice. Given enough work, fire could inflict horrors that would have bloody Boltons quaking in their boots.
He had years of it. And right now he was too terribly angry.
His boy, his heir, his son, nearly slain, snatched away, never to be heard from again. Why, just thinking of it threatened to send his temper pitching over the edge, which made him more than a bit aggressive at the moment.
Who sent you? He extinguished a burning brand and laid it down on the table, considering the scorched man strapped to it. Answer truthfully, now, or you will die. Screaming. I don't know. His victim thrashed against the table, straining in their shackles. I swear by all the seven. By all the old gods and the new. A masked man gave us a bag of coin and told us where to go. That's all.
A knife slammed into his thigh.
Not good enough. Perhaps we should use wildfire. He twisted the blade in their flesh, grating it against bone to draw forth a keening cry. Or would you prefer to feed Caraxes? Wordless gibbering answered him. No. That wouldn't do. You see, you didn't just anger me. Oh no, you angered quite a few lords with your stunt. One in particular.
He turned to face a shadowy corner.
What say you? He doesn't seem keen on talking. Perhaps you'd care to try your luck.
Otto. Hightower stepped out the gloom and drew his belt knife. This is your last chance. Tell us what we need to know, or the burning continues.
The man warbled. I don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't believe you.
A fresh scream pervaded the black cells, peaking higher and higher, until it broke.
0.
Under the cover of darkness, two hooded figures met in Flea Bottom.
Your men failed. The first remark proved damning.
Of course they failed. The second smiled. They were meant to. Did they know that, I wonder? The silence proved most telling.
One was taken prisoner.
The taller of the two tutted. As we knew he would be. And if he talks? What of it? The fool never saw our faces. He knows nothing, no, less than nothing. Likewise the king remains in the dark. The first turned away with a scowl. The prince should not have been there.
I warned you he might be. You were the one who chose to act. But the boy might make a suitable alternative to Daemon, given the right leverage. How so?
The first told the second. ... I see. The second sighed. Then it continues. The plan continues still.
They parted in silence. 0. Cousin.
Say what you would about little Lena Velaryon, but she was an energetic child. Scarce had Naruto crossed the threshold into her room than she was upon him with a cry, leaping in a swirl of silk and dark skin. He caught her in his arms with a grunt, spun her around once, and set her down on her feet. It didn't stop her from fretting over him. Anxious eyes flitted across his face and arms, searching for any sign of injury. "You're all right."
Of course I am, he laughed, batting her hands away. Why wouldn't I be?
"Father told me bad men tried to kill you." "They did." He granted her a grave nod. "They failed." She tilted her head, reminding him of a curious dragon he'd once seen. "Because you killed them first." "Because I killed them first." He tousled her pale hair and flung himself into a nearby chair, opting to spare her the grisly details. Poor girl was only 12. Let her stay pure a little while longer. "Where's your brother?" "You mean Laenor?" She plonked down beside him. "He's in the gardens with father. He wants to send him back to Driftmark on the next tide." Little hands wrung together, clenching fretfully. "Said it wasn't safe for him here."
A muscle jumped in his jaw, and yet he'd leave Laenor behind. That seemed cruel, even for him. Laenor was his heir, the dragon rider. Next to inherit Driftmark. By contrast, Laenor was simply the spare. No dragon rider she, not yet, and no special talents to speak of beyond an odd propensity for dreams. She was simply a replacement should things go awry. It hurt him to see her diminished to such. Laenor tugged at his sleeve. "I've been dreaming again." "Have you now?" He planted one elbow on the table and rested his cheek against it. "What of?"
His little cousin smiled. "Vagar. I saw her on a sandy beach far, far from here. She was sleeping there. I think she's waiting for me."
Vagar, eh? Now there was a dragon he'd like to meet. She must be ancient now. Massive. Far too large for the dragon pit. But there was only one dragon for him. Balerion was out there somewhere, like an itch scratching the back of his head, growing stronger every year. They would meet again in the next decade, if not sooner. He knew it. What would transpire during said meeting? Well, that was anyone's guess. Who could say, really? For now, there were other things to worry about. Whether the queen would deliver a boy or a girl for one. She'd survived so many births before this, even if most of her children hadn't, yet the king still craved a son.
No, best not to think of that for now. He turned back to Laenor and flicked her forehead. She rubbed at it with a whine. "What was that for?" "For luck. I'm sure you'll find her someday." He'd pay to see the look on Lord Curly's face when his daughter turned up with a giant dragon in tow. Speaking of dragons, he really ought to check in on. "Rhaenyra was looking for you, by the way."
Of course she was. Did she say what she wanted?
MMHMM. Little Laenor nodded. "She said something about finding a book you were looking for. On dragon sightings."
Ah. His eyes lit up. "Best cousin ever, love you, bye."
He kissed her cheek and shot out the door like an arrow.
0. He was late.
Why in the seven hells was Naruto always late? Really, it wasn't fair. He was always running around doing something with someone. Must be a boy thing. Someone knocked on her door, cutting her thoughts short. Once. Thrice. Once again. Her eyes lit up. She knew that knock. Enter Tilda. The door swung open, revealing his smiling face. Rhaenyra flung a pillow at it. "You're late," she chastised him in High Valyrian.
"I am never late." He caught it and laughed using the same language. "I always arrive precisely when I mean to."
"That's your excuse." Last time you said you were helping a blind cat cross the street. Was protecting a different kind of kitten this time.
She rounded on him. Who?
His lips thinned. Alicent, you might wanna visit her after this. Her smile faded as the argument on her lips withered and died. Ah, so it wasn't a lie then. She'd heard a few rumors whispered by the servants, but she hadn't wanted to believe them. An attack, here in Red Keep. Small wonder she hadn't seen Alicent today. Poor girl must be a nervous wreck. I shall. She granted him a nod.
Good. He strode past her. Do you have it?
I do. Rhaenyra tugged on his arm. This way. Sit. Naruto sighed. Such an impatient little cousin I have.
Hush. She brought him to her bed, reached beneath the blankets, and withdrew a heavy tome bearing a blood-red cover. I found it hidden away in Father's cupboard. An impish grin touched her lips. I've seen him writing in it more than once.
Finally, Naruto nearly hissed in triumph as he set it down on the bed and all but rolled it open. His bright eyes were already glued to the contents within. If he's mentioned Balerion anywhere, it's in here.
This again. Confusion tugged at her heart. Why are you so interested in Balerion? No one has seen him in at least a decade. He's surely dead by now. Her cousin winked her way. Is he? Naruto always said that, as if he knew. His fervor for finding dragons frightened her sometimes. At others, well, best not to speak of that. Father likely wouldn't approve of such a match. Desperate to distract herself, she steered the conversation to safer waters. I understand you're competing in the joust tomorrow. Not competing? Not competing, he hummed, turning another page. Winning, there's a difference. Aha! There it was, the heart of the matter. For all his claims of humility and kindness, he could be proud at times. She tilted her head to regard him and blew a strand of pale hair out her right eye. Which one? All three. Archery, the joust, and the melee. I've got a statement to make. Reality broke like a thunderclap. So that was his game. This would be his first real tournament, the first time the lords and ladies of Westeros saw what he could truly do on the field of battle. A pleasant little thrill coursed through her, warming her face. She stamped it down with a scowl. Ambitious of you, and unlikely, there will be many seasoned knights there. For some reason that only seemed to amuse him, his shoulders shook in silent mirth. I certainly hope so. He leafed to another page. Wouldn't be any fun if they went down without a fight. Gods above, he could be such a boy sometimes. Stay there. He listened half-heartedly, eyes still glued to the book. Rhaenyra left him to it, darted to her ribbon box and fiddled around inside it for a bit. Soon enough, she found what she sought. A strip of deep black cloth, laced with threads of red. She drew it forth, shut the box and ran back to him. He paid her no mind, until she began to tie it around his wrist. It fit, just as she knew it would.
Bright eyes flicked up to consider her and the little bauble she'd just given him. What's this?
My favor, she preened. I expect you to wear it under your armor tomorrow? I don't have any say in the matter now, do I? You do not.
All right, and thank you. He kissed her forehead. I'll wear it well. Help me read this passage here.
Together they went back to reading. 0, 0.
The tourney began with the trumpets.
Viserys certainly loved his spectacles. Naruto couldn't even bring himself to blame his uncle for them. He was the dragon. Likewise, he was also the crown, and it was the crown's job, duty, to project strength at all times. But this was... what was the word? Excessive. Yes, that was the one. His uncle had organized 3 contests of skill in honor of his heir's soon-to-be birth: archery, joust, and a test of arms.
He was looking forward to the latter. Not so much the former.
Drums emblazoned with dragons beat out a tempo as men and women waved dragon banners from the stands above. Even the announcer of this festivities had dragons stitched into his clothes. Dragons! Everywhere he looked, dragons, red and black. Black and red. Red and black. Even his own armor today was a rich, bloody scarlet, a contrast to his father's own black. He hated armor. It slowed him down. A little. The ridiculous dragon-winged helmet left his face open at that, which he found even more ridiculous. Well, I did ask for the challenge. His eyes swept over the arena once more. The stands were packed with noble lords and ladies whose names he couldn't be bothered to remember. The knights. Now those were a different matter, if only because he saw a great many banners he knew by heart. Stark, Lannister, Baratheon. Great names for great houses. He also saw Bolton, and of course, Hightower among them,